I call this meeting to order. This is the October 26, 2022 regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. Item number 1 on the agenda was a call to order. Item number 2 is to seat an alternate. We have none this evening. Item number 3 is a hearing of residents. Who's got the sign-up sheet? Yeah, no. Nobody signed up? Alrighty. Would you like to? Now, if you want to speak about the public hearing, the rezoning, you don't need to sign up for that. Okay? If you want to talk to us about something like else, then I'll give you an opportunity to sign up. No? Okay. All right, so nobody there. Item number 4A, election of Planning and Zoning Commission Chair and Vice Chair. You know, we should have done this already. Do we want to do it with the folks that are here? Do we want to put it off and try for more people? What do you all think? What's the consensus? Just go for it?
Go for it. Yeah, just go for it.
Okay. Well, here's the way I like to do elections. I'll call for nominations, and you can, it'll be a voice nomination. I think anyone except the alternates are eligible, even though our bylaws don't address that. I don't know how an alternate, anyway. And then what we'll do, we'll close nominations and we'll do a voice vote. Is that acceptable with everyone?
Yes.
All right, so let's start with chairman. Someone like to make a motion, like to make a nomination?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to nominate you to another year.
Okay, there's a nomination for myself. Anyone else? It's always a big rush to take this job. You ever notice that?
Do we second or
No,
does it work?
no, seconds really aren't right. I don't think they're required. No other nominations? All right, I'll close nominations. And all those in favor of Mr. Outlaw remaining as the chairman, say aye.
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 And aye. I'll vote for myself. Okay. Well, let's see. There's 5 of us here, so that's 5-0 for me. Okay. Vice chair. Open nominations. Ernie, you want to do it again?
Nominate Ernie.
Huh? I'll stay.
Okay, we have a nomination for Country Mr. Evans. Anyone else? I'll close nominations. All in favor of Mr. Evans being the vice chair, say aye.
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 Aye. Some things never change. All righty. Who's taking notes for the you are okay. All right, moving on. Item number 5 is the consent agenda, and I believe we just have the one item on there. 5A is the minutes from the October 12, 2022 regular meeting. Do we need to pull that for discussion?
No.
If not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Brown. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I'm going to give that one to Commissioner Broad. And there being no discussion on consent agenda, I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Oh, my God. Aye.
Aye.
I missed you.
5 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item number 6, public hearing. We have 2 of those this evening. But very quickly, the Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests and replats within this agenda. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to the city council if necessary. Let me just pause here real quick, Mr. James.
Yes, sir.
I probably should have said it before the meeting started. For those of you that may watch this on YouTube, due to some technical difficulties, you'll be able to see us, but you won't be able to see any of the slides or other things that are displayed on the overhead screen here. So apologize for that. IT has been, has been chastised. Well, anyway.
IT's equipment, yes.
All right.
Those nights.
So with that said, item 6A, PL PDD 2022-0020, too many twos in there. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 75 acres of land from General Business District and Manufacturing District Light, M1, to Planned Development District, PDD, generally located southeast of the intersection of IH-35 and Cibolo Valley Drive, also known as Guadalupe County Property Identification Numbers 68313, 68314, and 148510, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Mr. James?
Thank you,
And again,
Commissioner.
I have to apologize to the audience because we have to turn around and look up too. So go ahead.
We're having all sorts of problems tonight. So again, the property being rezoned is about 75 acres, as the caption said. So again, this is Cibolo Valley Drive. IH-35 is right here. Cibolo Crossing Development is right in here with Santikos, and then Evo is right in here. So just as a reminder for folks, this is where we kind of split boundaries with cities. So Cibolo has this property down here, and then this piece that we affectionately refer to as the Horsehead is City of Cibolo. But then beyond that, you move into City of Schertz around it. So again, the property does not include the Evo property, but it's the property along the frontage in front of them, coming down to Cibolo Crossing, up to this location, behind Evo here, and then there's a gap, so it's actually two parcels, this piece that's right up here at the corner of Old Wiederstein and Cibolo Valley Drive. Just so everybody kind of understands a couple of things, this is the piece of land that the school district owns, and so they own that piece as well that comes through for access to their property. So this is the property we're talking about rezoning tonight. Again, one of the things that we sent out and provided for folks, so we send a public hearing notice to everyone to all the property owners within 200 feet. So again, just to be clear, because we often have some confusion for folks and we send them into a panic, the area in blue is the area to be rezoned. The red line is simply that 200-foot notice. So again, oftentimes we get people showing up saying, hey, what's going on? Why is the city rezoning my property? And generally we're not. And then certainly I can appreciate folks in Cibolo getting that potentially and saying, what's the city of Schertz doing rezoning my property? And again, we're not, we don't have that authority, but they're within the 200-foot notice area. So per state law, we provide that property owner's notice. We also have the signs out on the property to catch people's attention as they drive by. Again, we had sent 44 notices out as of toward the end of last week. We had not received responses on it yet, kind of coming back. Again, just as a reminder in terms of what the current comprehensive land use plan says. So again, you'll note that we've got the couple of different designations up here. We have the commercial campus, we have the highway commercial, and then we've got the single family residential. So again, it's typically what you see in Schertz with regard to commercial along the frontage of IH-35, and then the land use designation in the back is for single-family residential. I will point out, though, that while folks may read that and think, well, that means only commercial in the red or pink and only single-family houses in the yellow, those are the broad designation that sort of characterize the overall character. However, within each of those designations, when you read the comprehensive plan, it talks about a mix of different land use types within those. So again, multifamily would be an appropriate element in certain locations up to a certain amount within those single-family residential areas going forward. So one of the things I'll note in a bit is that staff feels that the rezone is consistent with the comprehensive land use designation. Again, generally what they've got proposed is the commercial on the front here. They've got the sort of multifamily component back here within the res. They've got the area in the center I'll show in a minute that's a mix of both. And then again, as I said, even though this is single family, again, with our comp plan, supportive commercial uses are an appropriate element with that. And so much like when you come down Schertz Parkway and you see the commercial in front of the single-family residential homes off Schertz Parkway, so again, it may be the medical office building, it may be the little shopping center, it may be the doctor's office, it may be the coffee shop going in. That sort of stuff is appropriate as a mix within the neighborhood, those appropriate uses. Again, this is the zoning exhibit that went out with it, just in a little bit more detail. And then what I'll spend most of the time talking about, which is what everybody really sort of wants to know, is so what is it they're going to zone to and what can they do with the property kind of going forward. And in this case, they've really got 4 areas of the property that they've got distinct zoning for. They're fairly similar in some areas, but they're a little bit different in a few others. And so let me see what we've got. So again, what we've got is Area 1 is in the blue, and that's designated for commercial uses. So restaurants, office, service type uses, things like that, is what they've got proposed in the blue. In the yellow, Area 2, that provides both to be able to do commercial uses or multifamily uses or a combination of commercial and multifamily. And I think the applicant will talk about this. You know, often when we get these zoning cases, they sort of have an idea of what they may want to do with some parts of the property, and that may be what's driving it. But then other parts, they say, we really don't know yet. You know, what's driving it are some of the other sections, and so we want some flexibility, or we're going to make a guess at it at this point for the middle. And so that Area 2 is really allows both commercial and residential. Area 3 allows for residential. Again, that's the multifamily. And then Area 4, again, is commercial. Doesn't have all the kind of uses that would be allowed here. But so 4 different areas, and we'll talk about those each individually. And so again, with regard to the future land use plan, I'll come back to it. The designation is highway commercial, commercial campus, and single family. Even though that's the title of that characterization, when you look at the plan, some of the commercial and then the single family both recommend allowing multifamily within them. And so again, we would tend to want to see a mix, but that's where you evaluate the location of it exactly and decide where it makes sense. I think part of what makes sense in this case is, you know, some of the buffering between uses and things like that going forward. While we know that currently the school district owns this tract of land, the designation for that is single family, so I don't anticipate, and I've never heard they're planning to sell it. And obviously, if they didn't build a school there and they sold it, you'd most likely see residential kind of come in for that, and we think that multifamily makes a good transition to that. But certainly knowing what the school district's plans are, and they've indicated that generally this was to be the next high school, you know, when they acquired it, we still think those land uses provide a good mix with that kind of going forward. Again, if you think about what you see around Clemens High School, you've got the multifamily across the street, kind of over at Schertz Parkway, you get a bit of commercial, things like that going forward. And so again, staff has reviewed it, and then based on that, we're recommending approval of it going forward. But let me go back a little bit and talk about what exactly the PDD they're asking for with regard to it. And so I'll move area by area, and again, to sort of point out what they're planning to do. And just for the folks in the audience, much like most cities, we have what we call straight zoning districts. So GB is general business, and that outlines exactly what uses you can do, what the development standards are for that. So the maximum height of the building, the maximum lot coverage, various things with regard to landscape and architecture and parking. In this case, what the applicant is wanting to do is make some modifications to those, and so they've come forward with a planned development district. And part of that is because we would anticipate to some degree this development being somewhat integrated in terms of the proximity of those uses to one another, and so we think it makes sense to do some things a little bit different. So again, I'll start with Area 1, and so Area 1 generally is that general business district. So they want to allow all the uses in GB in the Code of Ordinances, plus a couple of extras. So auto repairs and service major, and then retail cabinet sales. And so the retail cabinet sales sort of makes sense if you get a store that does kind of interior design, decorating, home interior sort of stuff. Even like Lowe's, they sell interior cabinets, and so this would allow that use. The other thing is the auto service major. And so again, just to remind the commissioners and folks in the audience, we've got two designations in our zoning, our use table for auto-related repair uses. There's auto repair minor, which I would describe as sort of the oil change place that does a few other things for you. They'll change some filters, they'll change your wiper blades, they'll do an inspection, they'll do things like that, maybe a few other minor little things. But if that engine warning light comes on, typically you would not take it to the auto repair minor, you would have to take it to somebody designated as auto repair major. And so that's, I think, the thing to be clear is the minor is fairly limited. Again, you've got an engine warning light kind of coming on or something like that, or maybe even you need to get your brakes done, you're going to take that over to the major. And so we see this a lot with folks, that distinction between it. And so in this case, because it's on the frontage of I-35, seems to make sense that for that designation, so they've added that as well. And again, the option could have been go with the GB2. They opted to stick with the GB1 or the GB and just add the uses. So a couple of uses being added. They're also asking to modify the setbacks a little bit. So for example, the normal front yard setback's 25 feet. They're asking for 20 feet. There's a requirement adjacent to residential that there would be a 25-foot side and rear yard setback. They've opted to go with the normal 0 across the board. Again, they still have to meet building and fire code for separation requirements and whatnot. And again, what we would anticipate, even with this area, this is where the thoroughfare Rips Chrysler extension comes in. So to be clear, this commercial, you're going to have the roads separating between these two, so it's not directly adjacent. And then again, while it's not a requirement of the zoning, we would anticipate to see, typically of what you get on a retail development where they're not going to butt the building right up against the back necessarily, where that setback becomes an issue from it. And again, that solely assumes that they were to do multifamily across this altogether. And so again, as we've run the traps, there are a few things we feel like our other codes cover it, and it allows for a bit more flexibility in the development. It's not a typical situation where you've got different property owners and undeveloped kind of stuff between. The other thing that they've wanted to do is they've upped the maximum impervious cover to 85%, so a 5% increase from 80 to 85%. That's really, frankly, an aesthetic, and it's also a stormwater issue. And so one of the things that will happen is when engineering understands what that maximum impervious is, the stormwater will need to be designed to that, or if it's designed to a lower level, when those plans come in, they could not achieve the maximum impervious allowed by zoning unless they came back and accounted for that additional runoff. So again, it's really that standpoint. From the aesthetic standpoint, what we often sort of talk about is, can we tell a difference between 5% if we're looking at a site? And I think that's the issue in this case, because it's sort of a bit of a master plan community. A lot of it'll be developed, we think, with the lots next to each other. We don't have an issue with the increase impervious coverage going forward. The other thing that they've done is they've made some modifications on the building articulation standpoint. And again, what they've generally done is They've modified them for buildings that are larger than 15,000 square feet. So as folks may know, we've got requirements that on certain faces of the building, there's got to be articulation, both vertical and then horizontal. We want a little bit of variation, and that's why often on those buildings you see a little offsets at the top and things like that. Folks have had some challenges on that with some of the larger buildings, and so again, they put in a section that stipulates that those articulations or offset are required on buildings that are equal to or less than 15,000 square feet. So if they do that bigger building, that sort of big box, that same doesn't necessarily apply. The requirement is on any wall greater than 30 linear feet, and then stipulates sort of the amount of offsets. So they've tweaked a bit the offsets based on the size of buildings they think they'll come in with. Again, we don't necessarily have that issue. On the vertical articulation, they've stipulated that it will be with sides that face the right-of-way. So again, this is often one of the challenges that we have is if it's a side that nobody sees as much, why are we requiring as much back there? And so again, they've gone to the trouble to specify if it faces that street, it'll have the articulation. If it doesn't on another side. They've also gone in and made some modifications to some of the landscape standards. So one of the things they took out is a provision in that you need 9 shade trees per acre. And again, one of the issues is, before everybody panics, goes, we're not going to have any trees, we have a number of different spots in the ordinance that require trees on site. We just happen to have this one that says you've got to have at least 9 per acre. Again, I think in this case, they've taken that out and are relying on the other provisions kind of going in the code to move that forward. The next big one that they've done is, and this we're hearing a lot from folks, is they've modified the parking space size. Our normal parking spaces are 10 by 20. They've come in with 9 by 18. So again, as we've starting to see folks coming in going, man, land is so expensive, there's so much developable area, we want to sort of shorten those parking spaces down. Again, it's really one of those that I think we upped it for convenience. We upped it because a lot of folks around here drive big trucks. But again, if you consider how much more land that eats up, we're starting to see more and more folks come in wanting to reduce the parking space size. And that's generally what they've got for Area 1, which is the commercial. I'm going to skip over and I'll come back, but let me touch on Area 3 essentially, which is the multifamily, and I'll touch on what they're planning to do in those areas. So again, some of the same things going forward. So modify the front yard setback from 25 feet to 20 feet, the rear yard setback from 20 feet to 10 feet, and the maximum lot coverage from 75% to 80%. Same kind of logic with that. One of the things that I'll point out is the zoning is multifamily that applies to the lot, and again, so don't have the same issue. The other thing that they've done, though, is they have reduced the maximum number of units per acre. So they've come down from what the code normally requires of 24 to 12. Okay, so they've significantly reduced the maximum number of units allowed. While the ordinance does not stipulate this, one of the things that they have indicated, and I want to be clear, it's not required in the zoning is sort of this R4 multifamily, is they have a different type product than a typical suburban style apartment complex. Again, that's not required in the zoning, so they could come in and do a typical suburban style apartment complex under the proposed zoning, but they could only do it at 12 units per acre, which is really low. So to some degree, even though we're not locking in a layout, we're not locking in this proposal, dropping that density down that significantly, I think, pushes them into something other than a typical suburban style complex. So again, that's one of the things we often talk about. If it's not spelled out in the zoning, you need to assume we can't regulate it. And so the kind of product they're going to talk about, which is sort of a duplex kind of product, the sort of thing we've seen, that's not locked in. However, what is locked in is they can't do more than 12 units per acre, so they would have to have a lot of open space, which is ironic given the lot coverage, if they don't go that route. Again, they've dropped the shade trees. The other thing that they've dropped is the parking space down by 9 by 18. And then finally, the other one that we're seeing a lot of is, rather than the whole bedroom parking requirement, they're essentially coming in and asking for 1.75 parking spaces per unit. So again, that's sort of what we're seeing and we're getting from a lot of folks are, just give me a standard based on units, given the demographics that they're shooting for and things like that, as opposed to the scale up that says 1.5 per bedroom units, 2 per 2-bedroom units, 2.5 per 3-bedroom units, and the 5% guest parking sort of situation. To some degree, I think we're showing a bit more deference to the developer. It's their project. They kind of know who they're marketing to. If it's within reason, we're generally supportive of modifying that parking standard based on that with regard to what you see sort of going forward. Again, they've are wanting to provide a 15-foot landscape buffer instead of a 20-foot buffer adjacent to Cibolo Valley Drive. There's not a requirement to screen parking areas from rights-of-way. However, they are providing screening, but in this case, what they want to do is to be allowed to construct a metal or wrought iron fence as opposed to masonry. So again, it's a little bit where we're starting to see with, instead of people saying, hey, put this thing behind a wall, little imposing, little intimidating, we want to kind of have that connectivity, a little more view in, both for folks on the outside and inside looking out. And so we've seen that kind of come forward before. I will say that they had put in a provision, I think it was unintentionally, to reduce a provision that was in our ordinance that doesn't as much relate to landscaping, but it's among the other sort of section, and that has to do with the site distance requirement. They've dropped that. So again, what staff is actually recommending is approval of the zoning as proposed with the inclusion of UDC section 2114-3F. So again, they're going to follow all our normal site provision. I think what happened is they just didn't realize that was in there when they were making some modifications, you know, kind of going forward. So not an issue there. The other sections are fairly similar, and so I wanted to talk about those sort of going forward. But again, with regard to Area 4, in the zoning, what they've not done is they've not modified the use chart as they did in the first. So it's straight GB zoning in Area 4. They can't do the auto repair major, they can't do the cabinetry, and that sort of makes sense. We wouldn't probably typically think that would be kind of what would happen up there. And then really Area 2 is just a combination of the two provisions, the multifamily they've got here and the commercial over there, that effectively allows them to sort of do either or both going forward. So again, they've made some modifications to the standard. These are typically sort of what we're seeing folks kind of come in with. And again, I think a lot of this is a function of, as people try to comply with stormwater detention and deal with some of the issues, it's to not necessarily have our ordinance constrict them as much in some particular areas, but to give them some flexibility going forward. So again, staff is recommending approval of it as proposed. However, with that provision, and again, if the commission's okay with it, to include the normal requirement for site distance be applicable.
All right, thank you, sir. The applicant, they have a presentation for us? And your name and address for the record, please. You look familiar. I think you've been here before, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
You got to wing it because the whole system's down. So you can look right there, yes. And then just page down.
Hi, good evening. Ashley Fairmont, Killing Griffin and Fairmont, 10101 Reunion Place. Thank you all. I'll be presenting that, so I apologize, we can't look at each other. I do want to make a couple of quick introductions. I'm here this evening joined by Embry. John Kirk and Jeremy Williams are here from Embry, and then also Merit Development. Will Collins and Brittany Schindler are here from Merit. And so we'll hear from both groups today, which will have much more interesting presentations than I will. But I do want to make a couple of quick introductions. So it's been a long time coming for us to get here this evening. Actually been working on this site for John and Embry Development have been working on it for over a year. It's a complicated piece of property, and it's one that deserves a lot of thought and a lot of consideration into what goes into the development. It's over 75 acres. It's, you know, the face of Schertz, we consider it, kind of on the frontage there of 35. So we've been working pretty carefully on this plan. This is our first step in the entitlement process, and then obviously everything else with the development will come along thereafter. But we do want to share with you what's proposed for the property. So skipping forward, Brian did a good job of describing the site. But as I mentioned, it's about 75 acres, currently GB zoning along the frontage, and then the remainder of the site is the manufacturing light. So there's no intent to do any industrial here. So we needed to get rid of all of that industrial, all down Cibolo Valley up to Old Wiederstein. And so we're looking at the PDD option to give, yes, some flexibility with the design, but also to lock in and give some certainty as to what the project is as much as possible through the zoning. A couple other things, you can see the blue dot along that, or blue dashed line, excuse me, that is the extension of Rips Chrysler, which will go through the site. It will generally be in that location, slightly different, but generally there, and we'll show that on the plan as well. There's also a really large transmission line easement that goes right through the site, so that's something that makes it a little bit more complicated. Brian went through the PDD, and so the idea here, again, is to give that flexibility, but also the certainty. So we did the 4 areas so that we weren't coming in and asking for multifamily on the whole site or asking for commercial on the whole site. So we limited that so that you know that the frontage is going to be commercial. Behind that area is still a bit in flux. It could be all commercial. It could be that combination of commercial and multifamily, just really depending on the market there. And then there will be the road extension, which will go through, and then why we have a little bit of flexibility in those areas is because we're not exactly sure where the alignment of that road will be yet. But this PDD gives us the ability to shift it slightly pending engineering and other studies that need to be done. Behind that is the Area 3, which is the multifamily, which will be a really nice product. We say multifamily, but it's a single-family duplex type rentals, which John will describe a little bit further. And then that Area 4 is kind of a little leftover, a little over, you know, it's about 3 to 4 acres at the corner of Cibolo Valley and Old Wiederstein. And so we're asking for that just to have regular commercial zoning. We're actually capping the height on that to bring it down a little bit. And then that, you know, there's no definitive plans for that piece yet, other than it does make sense at that corner to be a commercial development. So here you can see just kind of overlaid with the aerial how those 4 areas would lay out. The Evo site is there, you know, kind of all alone. So we're really hoping that this development will activate that, will bring more people to the area, will serve citizens of Schertz, but also bring new residents to Schertz. And obviously we've discussed at length, and I know I've been here discussing at length, the shortage of housing and the need for more, all different housing options basically. And so that's what we think this project does, along with bringing some much needed retail and commercial services. Another layout, this is just a kind of a general schematic of how you can see with the commercial, that unknown in the middle, and then the housing piece behind it, and then the future commercial down at the corner. And then this here envisions that middle piece, that Area 2, as a big box commercial, which is certainly a possibility, and then some space behind it that could be developed as multifamily. Again, that portion is conceptual at this time, but something that is really being considered, and Will Collins with Merritt will get into more of the commercial piece that you can see on the frontage, and then the multifamily residential piece John is going to talk about shortly. So with that, if there are questions specific to the PDD, I know the document was long, a little complicated, more so than usual, so we're happy to answer those, but the idea here being to lock in and bring you guys a good project that you know a little bit more of what's going to be built as opposed to just a straight zoning. So I'm going to turn it over to John to talk about residential.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. John Kirk, Embry, 7600 Suite 300, San Antonio, Texas. As Ashley mentioned, we're the developer behind this project. I've been with Embry for almost 11 years. A little bit about Embry. We've been in business for almost 50 years, headquartered in San Antonio. We cover markets here in Texas, including San Antonio area, Austin, DFW. Then outside of Texas, we're in Phoenix, Denver, Nashville, Charlotte, and Orlando. And so my responsibilities at Embry is I lead our development team. And so I live in the New Braunfels area. I drive 35 every day, and driving by the site over the last few years, started just dreaming on it and seeing Evo and what was happening. And so it was probably spring, summer of 21, we approached the current landowner and started working with them. They're out of Detroit, went and visited with them, and it's a large site. Being 75 acres, it is a large site. And so what do you do with it? We partnered with a great commercial developer, Merit. They'll get up here in a second. We're a multifamily group. Been in business for almost 50 years, but fully integrated. So we have development, construction, and property management. So we're going to go develop it, we're going to go build it, and we're going to manage the property. And so the product that we have proposed on this site is a product that Brian talked about earlier, at lower density, 12 units to the acre. Here's the site plan. It's about 300 units on about, I think this is about 35 acres or so. You know, the site has some complexities. You know, there's a big transmission line that cuts across the site. There's about 4 to 5 acres of floodplain. When you drive by the site, you're going, really? Has floodplain on the site? And yes, there's floodplain on the site that we're working with FEMA on right now to make sure we're addressing that correctly. And you can see where that is located. The product that we're doing here is a product that we call Build to Rent. It's a lower density product that we came up with several years ago. We have several of these under construction right now. It's professionally managed. It's an apartment project, but with just a different style, with garages, with a yard, looks and feels like a home, but managed like a professional apartment project, which, you know, has the clubhouse, has the pool, the fitness. It's a Class A project, and that's what we do as a company. All of our projects in our portfolio is first class, really nice projects. And you know, this project, you know, from a size, call it attainable housing, as far as, you know, the demographic that we're targeting, and that who would want to live here. And so some of the images and just kind of what our vision was for the site, being in Schertz, and really wanted to tip our hat to the history of Schertz, hence the name Schertz Station. It's something that's just kind of growing on us on the site, and just some of the architecture elements that will be featured with this product, more of the farmhouse design. Here's a rendering of just what, from a street view perspective of this product. It's a combination of 1- and 2-story product. It's a duplex design with units facing outwards to the street, then inward to a esplanade, with you know, most of the units having you know, all the units having yards, and some of the units having garages. Here's another rendering of the esplanade on the backside, creating this nice courtyard for residents as well. Then this is an image of just our front door of our clubhouse. It's about 5,000 square feet. That's where we'll house 2 on-site property managers, an assistant property manager, and the team there, you know, leasing associates, maintenance, and so forth. And that's where we have fitness, our pool, business office for residents to enjoy. It's a really nice setup, and so that just kind of gives you an idea of what the clubhouse is going to look like. Here's another image of the pool, just from you know, behind the clubhouse. Before I get into the commercial and turn it over to Merritt, you know, one of the visions for the site being so large, of approaching it for this product and being us, you know, as apartment developers, with the commercial is that connectivity, the overall, the site of how the site flows, working with the staff of where the master thoroughfare plan comes in, working with that transmission line to just how that site, cuts across diagonally across the site. And so there's a few wrinkles on the site that we've been working on to say, okay, what makes the most sense here for the site that is high quality, that should be well received from not only the community, but for the marketplace. And so if you have any questions, I think after the presentation, we'll be glad to address those. At this time, I'll be turned over to Will Collins with Merritt.
Good evening, I'm Will Collins with Merritt Commercial Real Estate. We're honored to be a part of this project. We were honored to be selected by Embry to be their joint development partner. Merritt was, we've been around for a little over 10 years. We've developed over 1 million square feet of shopping center space. And we also live and drive by this area all the time. My daughter goes to softball practice across the street from this project, so I get to drive by it every Wednesday and Thursday evening, and couldn't be more excited to be a part of this and have the opportunity to bring some great new dining, shopping, and entertainment venues to the city of Schertz. So I think pictures speak 1,000 words, and this is a preliminary rendering of the retail portion of the project. And as you'll see, it's a mix of multi-tenant buildings, freestanding restaurant buildings, and then ideally we'd have the opportunity to develop a power center, an anchor and junior anchor power center in the back. This is another rendering, a close-up rendering of one of the multi-tenant retail buildings. In addition to bringing new options to the citizens of Schertz, this is also a major benefit to the city in terms of tax revenue generation. As I'm sure y'all are familiar, retail is a low demand on services and a high return on investment from the sales tax and ad valorem tax revenue that it generates. Part of the appeal in partnering with Embry on this project is the time and thoughtfulness that they put into all of their projects. Everything they do, they do first quality, and we do the same. And here you'll see a selection of plantings that are native to the area, and that's our goal. We want to really honor the area that we're developing in and make sure that it's something that is appealing but also blends well with the existing developments. So these are more renderings of the multifamily or the single-family build-to-rent. But yeah, we're excited, again, about being part of this project. We think there's a lot of potential here. We've seen this develop over the last 10 years and seen the traffic that Evo generates. And we think that some of our neighbors have done a good job of developing high-quality product, but we think we can do a better job. And just excited to be part of this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, before I open the public input, a couple of procedural things. If you'd like to, when I open it, if you'd like to address the commission, you're welcome to come up to the podium there. Please state your name and address for the record, and try to limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Okay, so at this time, I'll open it for public input. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this subject is welcome to do so. Nobody, or nobody wants to be first? All right, well, a quick comment. What the commission will do tonight is we will make a recommendation to City Council. City Council is the final approval or disapproval of zoning action. So this will appear sometime in the not-too-distant future on a City Council agenda. So if you choose not to speak tonight and you think of something in the meantime, you're welcome to come back and share those comments with City Council. So one more time, anybody want to share their comments or opinions? No? All right, I'll close the public input. And commissioners, who wants to start? Questions, comments? Do we have any rocks to throw at Mr. James tonight?
Probably. Usually are.
When you talk about the PDD that's going
sir.
to be needed for this development, I'm assuming it's going to address every paragraph of the UDC. However, I'm assuming it's also going to have multiple pieces added to illustrate the changes, and I'll make this up, paragraph 10-1 UDC says X, and they're proposing two different issues for X in those 1 through 4 areas. So each of those would have to be addressed separately in this PDD.
Yes, sir. So again, and that's a good question to help illustrate it for folks. So the way the PDD works is generally they come in, they've got a graphic like this, says these are generally the uses. We'll follow all the UDC regulations except where we go through and stipulate something different. So in that PDD document that's about 16 pages, of that I'd say about 12 or so are where they go through and say they're going to make some distinctions. And so again, for example, when it talks about uses, they say all the uses in GB, but we're going to add the cabinetry sales and the auto repair major. As they pointed out, in this area, one of the things they've done is they've dropped the maximum height from 120 feet to 35 feet. So again, if it's not listed at all, they follow the UDC, and then where they have the provision, they would follow that provision in the PDD. Yes, sir.
Have you seen this proposed PDD?
Yes, sir, I have.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick, Brian. I got that email where you
Yes, sir.
Sent us the PDD, and did you send that to all the
I
commissioners?
did, yes, sir.
Okay. The only difficulty I have is my personal email, that went to my personal email, and that isn't linked to my commission iPad.
I
so-
apologize, okay.
But I do, and so, as much as I wanted to bring that with me tonight, I was running late, and I completely forgot about it, but I do appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Whoever made the notes, their handwriting's atrocious, okay?
As I told Commissioner Bro, you can blame the nuns who
Yeah.
taught me my penmanship. Always a disappointment for my parents in that regard.
So I did have a chance, Commissioner Evans, to read through the PDD, and it's not quite as, it does address the exceptions they want. There's aren't quite as many as you might think. I'm sorry you didn't have a chance to read that. Anything else?
Well, yeah, I just want to say one more time, I'm not comfortable with this PDD yet, because we are talking about exceptions to things like setbacks. We're talking exceptions to coverage, and they don't seem to be spelled out to me to delineate the difference between Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, especially after looking at the presentation tonight, which shows me the single-family duplex area. Okay?
Yes, sir.
I'm uncomfortable with it so far.
Yeah, if I might, Brian, jump in here real quick again, put my fire marshal hat on. Commercial development has always provided for zero setbacks.
It has.
And when they do that, there are construction and fire resistance requirements because they are subject to the building code. And the building code, the closer you get to that lot line, the more fire resistant, the less openings you can have. So as I read through the PDD, again with my fire marshal hat on, I never have concerns with setbacks on commercial property because the building code does a pretty good job of handling that. But like Mr. Evans, in your presentation tonight, there's a lot of, well, I say a lot. The question running through my mind was, okay, they want all these exceptions, what's in it for us?
Sure.
Well, they kind of showed us what's in it for us, particularly on the M1. You know, I know some folks were here with some concerns, and sometimes you guys used to put up the different, what they could do if we didn't change it. And, you know, a large chunk of that property on Cibolo Valley Drive is zoned M1.
That's right.
And the kinds of things they could put in there, you probably don't want across the street from your house. So in a lot of cases, it's one of those things, again, where we want something to go here, and we certainly, I don't think nobody anymore wants M1 to go up there, okay? So now you're looking, this is looking pretty good. You know, I watched the multifamily with what they call the Esplanade, and it brought back memories. The first set of base housing I lived in at Great Falls, Montana, they were duplexes, and they backed up, and there were no fences. And so, you know, about 100 feet behind you was the back doors of the street behind you. And, you know, that area was just always full of kids, and, you know, it was really great. So it brought back some good memories. Who else wants to talk? I've got some more, but I'll wait.
And just if I may, Commissioner, for folks in the audience to illustrate, this is the GB, and then again, this area on the perimeter is the M1. So again, I think that's important to note. One of the benefits city gets is we move away from the M1. That's old zoning that's been there for decades. That's clearly not appropriate. Again, we're not as worried about it with the school district, but certainly I think, yeah, if you live in these neighborhoods, you know, you really don't want the M1 coming in probably around you.
Now, again, you noted that that's school district property, but, you know, if it belonged to somebody else, they could come in and build a warehouse and wouldn't even have to ask the city, because it's zoned for that, so. If nobody else jumps in here, I'm going to keep going.
Just a second.
So I think that this is a great project to come to Schertz. I definitely think that it would bring, you know, some great businesses, some great restaurants. I'm a fan of the multi-use properties and the attainable housing. The only thing that I am a little bit concerned about is the rezoning for the manufacturing district to M1. You know, and just thinking long-term, if that's going to be a good addition there with the neighborhood, and if that's going to be something that's going to be a problem long-term. But other than that, I think that it's a great project, and I just also want to second what the chairman was saying before about just the breakdown of all of the things that they're asking for. It's just kind of a lot, and I'd like to see a little bit more like broken down into sections so that we can really know like what the use is going to be for each development and how that's going to go.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, the only, if council approves this PDD, the only M1 left will be the school district property. We're changing it from M1 to GB on the corner and R4, okay?
Right. So I think if this helps maybe, and again, I can appreciate your concern. So staff always goes through when we get rezonings and say, well, is that viable long-term? Are we going to look up 10 or 20 years from now and go, oh, I get it made sense at the time, but in hindsight, probably a bad decision. So here I think is staff's perspective of it. And so to keep in mind, we look at sort of what we currently have. So this is the frontage of IH 35. And again, we don't typically put residential right up to IH 35. That's not ideal. You just get noise from traffic. Even if you live in one of the neighborhoods a little down, you tend to hear that at night. And so the commercial seems to make a lot of sense. The other thing we sort of start with is that the school district has this property. Theory, as they've indicated, it's likely a high school. So again, with a high school, you get the fields, you get the activity, things like that. And so part of what we're kind of talking about is if you assume those things, then what makes sense kind of in between? Flex space we think makes sense, but we think this product makes sense as a multifamily product as well. As multifamily, it could be a condominium regime or it could be rental. And so one of the things typically is just where we place that. We're not sure this is really well suited to a single family residential neighborhood. We just don't think it makes sense that ideally you would put that single family between it. And frankly, it's too much land to really make it viable as all commercial. And so again, that's kind of how we look at it is there an ideal, but then where are those sort of constraints that come in? And again, one of the things I'll remind folks here is we have not had a lot of multifamily kind of come in development of Schertz. If you compare Schertz to even Cibolo, we have very little. And what we often kind of hear is where's the appropriate place for it, things like that. And so certainly, we're cognizant of our neighbors in the single-family residential neighborhood here in Cibolo. Cibolo has zoned this for multifamily over here, and so we think it kind of makes sense here. And again, with the product type that they've proposed and that reduction in the density from 24 units an acre to 12 units per acre, we think as best as we can, and nobody has a crystal ball, that because of all those factors, that's why we think this is probably a good spot for the multifamily to go in. But again, we don't know for sure. Again, just thought process.
Couple of questions. What is the deal with this, the site of a well site back there? Is that going to stay or go, or there's a note about a water well?
So yeah, we often have properties, particularly old ag, that may have a water well site on it, and typically what we find is that we'll see what the developer ends up doing with it. If they have rights to that water, they may use it. If not, they typically cap that and close it. I'd certainly look to the applicant. They can speak to what they may want to do with that.
I noticed with we're adding auto service heavy or whatever it's called.
Auto repair major.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
major. I'd hope not to see that on 35, but that's okay, if that's what it's going to take. I noticed the setback and the coverage changes and the landscaping changes. I'm kind of sympathetic to that, mainly because this piece of property, like I think John said, this is a difficult piece of property. They're going to have to build a street running through it. They have a power easement, and there's a floodplain in there. So there's going to be a lot of property taken up by non-developed things. And so I kind of sympathize with that, and I'm willing to let go with a little bit of setback and some landscaping and some coverage, as long as we can get the flood control right and the runoff correct. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and again, maybe just to illustrate for folks, good sort of point. So again, as Ms. Fairmont said, this is the generalized alignment of the thoroughfare on the thoroughfare plan. What it's likely going to do, though, is a line here. It'll come down, and then again, typically what staff sees that plan is to bypass the residential here and kind of cut up in here. And again, you can see the floodplain in this location generally up here that they have to deal with.
Does that come down 3009?
I believe it does. I think it comes all the way down, as you can see, and that big drainage kind of feature we have here on 3009, that's what it does, and then comes back through Greenshire over here, and then I think eventually hits Deets Creek, and then takes off on down. Yep.
Kimberly Horn and our engineer better be on their toes for that, because that's a significant run of water.
Yeah.
And we've had problems down there before on 3009 where it crosses.
We have, and so again, just as a reminder, the applicant's kind of got two things he's dealing with. As he said, you go out there and you look at it, unless you've been out there when it's raining and kind of see as it starts to kind of come down off that, you're probably shocked. It's got floodplain. So they have that they deal with, but then they have the typical detention requirements of the city as well. And so again, the idea is you don't have more water coming off faster than you do presently is what that's intended to do, and that's intended to avoid some flooding.
And we've had issues before by, what is it, Fawn or?
Yeah, we've got issues, and this is, again, this one tends to, the good news for them is it stays on this side of 3009, but for the commissioners who've been around a while, and again, it doesn't quite show up, but we have issues with, it's not floodplain because 3009 blocks it, but the water that kind of comes up here comes down in these areas off Fawn and Antler, and so we get a fair amount of water running through here. Kind of, I guess 3009 serves as a dam, so yeah, we have issues there. So as this stuff develops, we'll have to be cognizant of that, but this piece of property doesn't really impact it.
And I like the different multifamily. Cibolo's got that giant apartment complex going up, and I'm assuming that's going to be regular style apartments. So this different product is going to be good, I think.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Again, as I said, thank you for sending the PDD, and as I read through it, and I wish I had it with me this evening, but in at least 2 or 3 places, they talk about special use permits, and that they weren't going to, if I'm my memory, it's something about they won't do anything without the SUP. But by including auto service major, the cabinet shops, and outdoor amusement in the PDD, then they will not be required to get SUPs for those?
That's right. They would not be required to get SUPs, nor would they be required to do a rezoning. Okay. So again, those I think were the uses they said, we had to pick the few that are most likely to see, these are the ones, so let's put it in by right. But again, any of the other uses in the UDC for GB that require an SUP, they would have to come in and seek the SUP for if they wanted to do that, and that would have to be approved by council.
Like a convenience store with gas pumps?
With gas pumps, as we've often seen.
Oh, shoot. I had a thought, and now it's gone. It'll come back. Oh, well, I was going to address, I think it's Ashley, is it? Do I have that correct? Yeah, you mentioned about how long you've been working on this project. Well, think about how long we've been looking at, Evo, and now we're watching Cibolo Crossing, and we're going, what's up with this piece of property? Now, a little history, I thought we had already done a PDD up there, but apparently all we did was rezone, the only PDD was for Evo. Right. But when they did that, they showed us a concept plan for the entire property, and it included multifamily, it included commercial retail. Again, this is more in line with, if I can say, what the property was intended to be. Okay. I know we're going to talk about reducing parking space size in the next item.
Yeah, and we'll probably actually look to table that with Tiffany not here to take notes and some of the AV issues.
I got to put my fire marshal hat back on. Okay, here's my only concern. We're going from 20 to 18, so we cut 2 feet off. But are we maintaining, in other words, I think right now we get a 20 or 24-foot drive lane between those rows of parking. Well, now we're cutting that back. We're cutting the parking spaces back to 18 feet. Does the drive space remain at 20?
Drive space remains at 24. So if you look at the graphic in our parking, the graphic is 25, but I got to be blunt. I think we typically just require 24.
Well, here's where I'm going now. You're still going to take these super giant pickup trucks with bumper guards and super heavy-duty trailer hitches on the back, and they're going to stick out from that 18-foot parking space, and now you've, because we've maintained the same drive width, now we're losing that. We actually have less driveway. For what that's worth.
Yeah, I think, and Commissioner, if I may, I don't disagree with you, and I think part of as we go forward, these are some of the bigger questions we have to deal with. I think one thing I would say is that, you know, there are a lot of cities out there that have the 9x18, and it works. Yeah, is it not as convenient? Maybe to you, as you're pushing your shopping cart, you're banging on somebody's, you know, hitch. Back of
I
it.
don't think it will be an issue for my fire department friends. But I'm telling you, Brian, the older my biggest fear now is backing out of a parking space.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's interesting. We talk fiber, then we talk residents. Again, as our population ages, we have a fair number of disabled vets that you know, again, their ability to turn maybe. And again, I will say, as we've added city vehicles that have backup cameras, it's amazing how you start to rely on that and how technology kind of helps you. So again, is it, you know, often what we hear are the door dings at the 9 as opposed to the 10 is even the 20 and 18.
Right.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So
You gotta be
we also design our drive aisles to be 25 feet wide, so that's where we get that extra space for backing out. And we'd rather design it that way to share it with both sides of the double-loaded drive aisle, rather than the 24 feet. So
Okay.
we're gaining that extra foot back there.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and, you know, that's not a showstopper for me, but Brian will tell you, I always have to get my 2 cents worth in. Just to understand, so the R4 density is being reduced from 24 per acre to 12 per acre, so we're going to have fewer units than they could have had.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, when you talk about what are we getting for these trade-offs, that's a big deal. It provides the flexibility, but it really reduces the density for.
Again, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Well, your reduction that he's working to understand was one of the concerns I really have. I am one of those elderly people that you talk about.
With the super
I
long,
have a truck
I'm
sitting
not-
right out there that takes up 2 parking spots when I pull it in. It will not fit in one without sticking out into the roadway either way, or it's going to cross the parking stripe behind me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, I agree, Commissioner. What I will say is certainly it's a little more convenient having the bigger parking space. I think what we're struggling with as a community is the benefit of that greater convenience with the cost of that. You know, when you consider how much that increases the size of that parking space, and when you consider the cost of the land, that's not insubstantial. For us, we sit there and go, oh, it's just a couple feet. But as they run the numbers and add that up, and God knows what they're paying per acre, and then again, that reduces the developability that we have in Schertz. You know, as people want things, to some degree, it's trying to fit those things in an area that folks have that convenience.
and again, for a little clarification, this is a zoning issue. It's not a building permit issue, but some examples of auto, what do they call it, auto service heavy or major.
Major.
Of course, I think that includes like Mr. Roberts, probably the Schertz Car Care or whatever.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that, does Discount Tire, does that fit in that?
I think they're a major as well. I mean, I can
then, of
certainly
course-
look it up here and see, but yeah, it's
Well, I'm just trying to think of it in my head, I'm just trying to think of
Yeah.
some examples, right? You know, it's not just a mechanic shop, but, you know, yeah.
yeah, let me,
Commissioner Outlaw, that was really the use type. When we took a strict interpretation of auto repair minor, we thought there might be, a discount tire might not fit in that category. That's why we're requesting.
Okay, okay.
And it's really that concept.
All right, thank you. And then my last question, does the development intend to use or at least connect to the existing driveways at Evo?
Yes.
So you'll be able to go from Evo to and then back and forth? And of course, I'm sure we're going to have, from the back part of Evo, we'll have access to Rips Crust.
right.
Right.
Yeah, and let me, Commissioner Outlaw, that was really the use type. When we took a strict interpretation of auto repair minor, we didn't, we thought there might be, a discount tire might not fit in that category. That's why we're requesting.
Okay, okay.
Right.
We kind of had to made them put in that emergency drive.
We put in the emergency drive right there, so the road will come right up in that area
Okay.
and connect. And I can pull up real quick if you want, and we can
No,
look at
no,
those
that's
definitions.
not for me,
folks.
Brian.
No, okay,
That's fine.
I was almost there.
All right, I'm done. Anybody else?
So the last thing, more informational, if that's it, just for folks in the audience who may be watching. So one of the things the city is working on is installing landscaping in the median in Cibolo Valley Drive. So again, if you're down here, it's concrete, but then as you get a little ways down, it opens it up. It's just kind of gravel and rock in there. So the city's contractor that we've hired has come in and done the water taps. We were letting the temperatures cool down, and so in the next few weeks, you should see the contractor going out there and installing landscaping in that median to dress it up. So just as a side note.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, this will be a recommendation to City Council to either approve with conditions, or deny, and staff has asked that if we do want to recommend approval, that we include, if I wrote it down right, 21.14.3F. And remind me again what that is, Brian?
That is the provision
distance?
with regard to they have to meet the site distance requirements of the UDC.
So did I get that number right?
So it's 21.14.3, Section F.
Okay. So if anyone would like to make a motion, it's always like this, folks.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of PLPDD 2022-0020 with the comment of 21.14.3 Section F included.
Thank you, sir. I have a motion to recommend approval with the caveat from Commissioner Ray. Do I have a second?
A second.
And I have a second from Commissioner Brown. Any more questions or discussion? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. So if I counted right, that's 5 ayes, none opposed. So that motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving on to item 6B is another public hearing. This is PLUDC 2022-0135, hold a public hearing, workshop, and discussion and possible action to make a recommendation on amendments of Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, UDC, to Article 5, Section 21.5.11, Specific Use Permit, Article 9, Section 21.9.7, Landscaping, and Article 10, Section 21.10.4, Schedule of Off-Street Parking Requirements. This item was tabled at our September 28, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And I think that's what Mr. James is asking us to do.
That's right. We have Tiffany's out at the City View Conference along with Emily and Lisa, so they're not here for it, don't have notes. And then again, we've had our audiovisual troubles we've been having, and then some additional that we just ran into with our booth room. So again, we're recommending we just push this one back so we can better discuss it next time.
Now, because it was posted as a public hearing, I am required, or we are required to conduct that public hearing. So once again, if anyone in the audience would like to address the commission on this subject, feel free to step forward. Once again, the mad rush. Okay. One more time. Anybody? Okay, I'll close that public input. Commissioners, if it's okay with you, I don't know, do we call this table or postpone, Dan? Dan, is the motion to table or postpone?
It should be postponed.
Okay, yeah. So if anyone would like to make a motion,
Motion to postpone PLUDC 20220135.
Second.
okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Brown and a second from Commissioner Broad, and I assume that's, do we want to say the next meet? Do we need to specify when it comes up again?
So it's best if you do.
Okay.
Because you had a public hearing here tonight and folks present. It's not, if we know that it can be on the next meeting, that would be.
Okay.
But I'm looking at Brian here to see what he.
All right, so Commissioner Brown, would you like to amend your motion to specify until the next meeting?
Motion to postpone until the next meeting, Article PLUDC 20220135.
All right, thank you, and you
Second.
still good with a second? All right, so I have a motion and a second to postpone until our November meeting. Any further discussion, comments? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. We'll get this done one of these days, Brian. All right, moving on to item 7, requests and announcements. 7A, request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Does anyone have anything? I will tell you all that I talked to staff. I have asked for a workshop discussion, possible action sometime after the first of the year at a meeting to discuss, when you look at the ordinance that creates the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then you look at our bylaws, there are some discrepancies between the two. And so I have asked for that to be, I didn't want to bother with it during the holidays, so sometime after the first of the year, staff will put that on the agenda for us. Nobody else has anything else they want to hear? Okay. Anybody have any announcements?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
For those of you, I don't know how many got to attend the APA's annual conference thing, our training. All the training provided was very good. I will say that much for it. A lot of walking. And the only thing I didn't like about the whole setup was they changed the format that we've been used to for the last 20 years. And I'm used to the kickoff keynote speaker being the first thing, not the last thing. But other than that, it was a great one, and thanks, City.
All right. Yeah, I think you're the only one that went, the only commissioner that went this year, Ernie, and yes, we all appreciate the fact that the city at least gives us that opportunity. Any announcements by city staff? No? Item 8 is information that's available in your P&Z Commission packets. There's no discussion on that. So item 9, there being no further business, this meeting's adjourned.